location here at Port Royal Speedway, and joining Steve and I is Bobby Davis Jr. Bobby, we've got your famed Weikart Beefmobile here, and I want to kick it off real quick. We're going to talk about Bob Weikart, of course, but I want to start with something that was extremely unique on your sprint car. It was Mrs. Beef. Talk a little bit about what she meant to you growing up. Everybody knew who Bob Weikart was, but you had a special relationship with Winnie.
Yes, ma'am, I did. And as you can see, or we don't have a really good picture of it right now, but all the other race cars have always had Mr. Beef on the hood, going down the nose of the hood. And I always teased Mr. Weikart. We called him Pappy. I always teased Mr. Weikart that I was going to put Mrs. Beef on our car, on the car I was driving. He said, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. So when the sign painter showed up to put the name on it and letter the car, I said, look, you have got to put Mrs. Beef on it. I said, that's who I deal with. That's who, Pappy just, me and him are just, partners in this thing and everything. But we deal with Miss Winnie on everything, like the winnings, ordering parts or getting permission to get parts. And so I was fortunate enough to put Miss Beef on my car, and I really like that. I always tease him about it.
Well, yeah, she was also that, but you were a 19-year-old kid, and I understand you had some meals at the table that she prepared too, and that probably was as important as anything else.
Well, let me tell you, I got in trouble one night. Very first time we went to Mr. Weikart, Miss Winnie's house they invited us to have me and my girlfriend at the time. She's my wife now, but at the time it was my girlfriend. And they invited us to have steak. They was going to cook it. So they got the steaks out. They cooked them right in front of us and everything. And they drink water and have one piece of white bread and a big steak from the Weikart livestock stock. And I said, and my silly little self said, Pappy, do you have any ketchup? And he said, boy, don't you ever ask for no ketchup to eat my steak. So I learned right then to eat his steak just like he cooks it. I said, yes, sir. I am terribly sorry. And it was delicious. It was delicious.
That is phenomenal. We have heard so much about the table at Bob's house and how much has gone down there, whether it was dinners or meetings or whatever it may be. Talk about what that table and sitting down with the family always meant to you.
Well, when I come up here, I was 19 years old, and I got to stay at the house with one of the daughters, and her name was Betsy. And right down the street from the shop. Now, this is probably a little different story than what you just asked me, but she would cook breakfast in the morning, lunch for lunch, and then dinner for all the working crews out in the barn and in the field taking care of the cows and everything. Well, there I was. I got to eat sausages, hot dogs. I mean, it was awesome. And then all I had to do was just drive half a mile down the road, go to work at the shop. So she was really, really, really good to me. Took care of me, and I really miss that. That was a great time of my life. And I don't know. They're really good, but. It's just a big family. They have 8 kids, so.
Well, and you're not from Pennsylvania. You were from Memphis, Tennessee. And coming into central Pennsylvania, did you basically live at the Weikarts then? That way it was just easy for you to work on things at the shop and then head on the road to travel to whatever racetrack you were going to that weekend?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Weikart let me live in one of his older houses he had on a farm. And believe it or not, Todd Weikart lives in that one now. They remodeled it and everything after I left. But it was great. Every one of his houses has a humongous grandfather clock. I mean, as tall as this ceiling. They're like 3 foot wide, the biggest thing you ever seen in your life. They're beautiful. And it was just adorable. Open doors, just take care of you. Anything you need. Gave me a vehicle to drive. I didn't have to drive the race truck, gave my wife a car.
Oh, wow.
He gave my wife a car to drive her. I mean, great people.
Man, for a 19-year-old, you were living large.
I was. I thought I was just Elvis Presley or something.
Indeed. The interesting thing for me is, and you shared with us on the stage, the beginning of the Weikart relationship came from a terrible day at a racetrack for you in Springfield. Tell us about that day and how you ultimately got started with Bob Weikart.
Yes, sir. We was at. I met Mr. Weikart for the first time at Springfield, Illinois, at the mile, and they was racing their car. Matter of fact, it's not that car, but one of the older cars. Keith Kaufman was driving it, and we had a really bad day. We blew the motor in the heat race. We had to change motors. We had to run the B main. We broke a rear end in the B main. We had to change the rear end, and we did all this in time, and we still made the A feature. The Jacobs ladder broke during the B main, so it tore the rear end out of the car, but I was able to finish like 2 laps to go. So I transferred, made A main. I believe we ended up running 5th that day. It was a World Outlaw race, and it was the first time I was ever there. So the bottom line was we had a lot of stuff laying out on the side of the trailer. It looked like a junkyard because we done tore up so much stuff, but we did put it back together and was able to finish the race that day. So we decided that, okay, Little Springfield is a little bitty, a third mile, quarter mile. It's real little, high bank. And we decided to go there for Sunday night. This was Sunday at the mile. We decided to go there for Sunday night. So we went over there, and we did good in the heat race. We made it through the heat race fine. And believe it or not, we won the feature. But coming for the checkered flag, 2 cars in front of me wrecked really bad, and they was flipping. And when they was flipping, of course, I was coming for the checkered flag, and they all landed right on top of me. So it tore the nose wing up, it tore the hood up, it tore the wing up, it just everything. So we just piled all that junk on top of the trailer because it just looked like we was in a junkyard. So the next morning, Mr. Weikart gets up, and we was, believe it or not, we staying at the same motel. So my trailer and his trailer was parked next to each other at the motel. And he got up the next morning. He said, "Oh, my God, that kid had a rough day and a rough night." So he was eating breakfast, and he reads the newspaper. He said, "Bobby Davis Jr. wins Little Springfield Sunday night." He said, "Oh, my God, he won the race." But we had a pile of junk. So we had a really rough day. And believe it or not, from that point on, there was a gentleman named Ken Jenkins at Gambler Chassis Company that I was involved with, that we got our race cars from. And Gambler Chassis Company at that time, 1982, they kind of got started. I had one of the first cars when I drove for my father. And we had a great relationship with them. And Kenny Jenkins knew Mr. Weikart really well. And those two got together and put a deal together for me to get with Mr. Weikart. But that one race is what really set it off.
Really, really great stuff. And you mentioned Keith Kaufman. Bob fielded a car for both of you at the same time there at one point. And Keith, very prominent in this area, his hometown. What was it like working with Keith? He was a veteran at that point. You were 19 years old. What was it like working with him? Did you guys kind of play a lot of information off of each other?
Well, that's correct. When I come up here late in 1982, Keith was driving one of the cars, and then they had 2 cars, so I started driving the other one. We had 2 trucks, 2 trailers. We had Mr. Weikart at that time. I was using a little old ramp truck that they had. And but yes, we didn't really, they let me do my thing, and Mr. Hinchy, Dick Hinch, was mechanicing for Keith Kaufman, local gentleman here, really good, very nice. And I'd like to thank them, too, because I had to live with them for a little while when I got started, because that family was great to me, too. And believe it or not, they was really good. They took care of me. And but, yes, they took care of their stuff, and I kind of took care of my stuff. And, we had issues with the, we didn't get to finish every race. Stuff was breaking and stuff. But we had a rough half of the 82 year. But Keith was really good. He's won a lot of races here at Port Royal, Williams Grove. Yes, ma'am, he has. And he was one of the guys I always beat up here.
What was it like? Because, you're talking Keith Kaufman and Lynn Paxton and Smokey Snellbaker, and you're coming into a Hall of Fame. You're literally, when you come to Central Pennsylvania, you're coming into to a Hall of Fame type area, and you're the 19-year-old kid, but you're in Bob Weikart's car. What was that like as a kid coming in here with all of that?
I probably back then I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
Seriously. And I might not even really known who Lynn Paxton and Keith Kaufman was at that time. All I knew is from where I started racing and following the Outlaws at my beginning, the first race I ever raced a sprint car was a World Outlaw race in Houston, Texas. First time I ever sit in one. Yes, sir. So I didn't really know or think about that. All I really had on my mind, believe it or not, was just winning and focus and all the hard work that we put into it. I can't even say I even recognized that. But as I got to know Lynn and how nice a gentleman he was, and Keith, and then I was, all the history that they've had at that time, I said, wow, this pretty heavy hitters, So, maybe your head gets a little big. I don't know. But I try to stay calm about it all. And just all I knew is I wanted how much tradition the Weichert car had. And I said, this is going to be great. I want to keep this going.
You talk about that focus and that drive, and we always talk about how that makes a guy so successful. And you and I had chatted earlier. We talked about your hero being Doug Wolfgang, and he was very much the same way, very driven. People had their opinions about him, but he was a good race car driver. And you talked about him kind of taking you under his wing. What was it like working with him and the relationship that you two created, and what did you really gain from him knowledge-wise?
Yes, ma'am, that is true. He definitely took me underneath his wing, and Wolfie wouldn't lie to you. Some of the other guys say, okay, this little kid, he's coming up here, he's going to be pretty fast. Let's don't tell him too much because we don't need him in the way. This is going to take another spot. We're going to be running 5th or 6th, or now he's going to be running 3rd or winning or whatever it might be. But Wolfie was a straight guy. Back then, he was driving for Doug Howell and Miss Howell. They was great. Even those two helped. The whole little team helped. But Wolfie, even today, he'll tell you what's on his mind, and he'll be truthful with you. He's a great guy. Behind the scene, he was dedicated. He gave 120%. So I learned a lot from him.
When you drove for Bob Weichert and you won a race, Victory Lane was entertaining for the fans. What was it like for a young driver to have the team owner out there saying he only ran half throttle, next year we're 7 cylinders, now we're going to have 8? What was that like for a driver standing behind him while he's just riling the place up to the high heavens?
Yes, sir. He would get them going, that's for sure, yeah. But that was great, Back then, he would get on that microphone and you want to race, and I didn't even know it was coming. That was my problem at the beginning. I said, wow, what did he just do? And here comes the grandstands. They're cheering and rearing him on. And some people loved him, some people hated him. But even the people that hated him, I promise you, they loved him because he made sprint car racing up here. You take Bob Weichert, Al Hamilton, all them people, they was dedicated to the sport. And all the money that they spent, they let them have their time. You don't get to Victory Lane every day. So my opinion was it was great. I liked it, and he would get them roused up.
He loved to stir the pot.
Yes, and he put me on the spot. You talk about stirring the pot. He put me on the spot, so he would get up there and he would say, y'all just wait till next week. You think this is something. So I'm going, Pappy. But it was good. We come back and win again,
Had to put the pressure on you a little bit. And I want to talk about that too. Bob was all about winning. He didn't really like to finish second. So what was it like the nights that you didn't end up in Victory Lane? Was there a chat at the end of the evening that he was like, what happened?
No, ma'am. It was nothing like that. No, ma'am. It was unbelievable. He was behind you 120% if you won, ran second, or ran 24th, or maybe even tore it up. He was the same. He had his cowboy boots on with the cow manure on it. He was happy, and he was at the races watching his number 29 Weichert Livestock. And just be safe was his biggest issue. He didn't want no one to get hurt. He said we could always get plenty of cars. So his biggest issue, just don't get hurt.
When you looking at the numbers, 1983, Port Royal, 17 races, you won 13 times. What was there about this track that obviously suited your style, and obviously suited the Weikart car as well? But what was your recollection of why you could just roll in here and win 80% of the races?
Well, I don't really know how to answer that right now, but believe it or not, we had a setup that would work just about anywhere we went. I would run that car. I would start with it a certain way at Williams Grove, Port Royal, Lincoln. It didn't matter where we was at. We had a great starting spot and starting spot on the car. Like the setup and everything. And we just worked from that. And if that motor would run and last us all night, we had a good chance to win. So I don't know. These tracks are really big. I wasn't even used to none of that. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they're humongous.
Indeed. And, we talk about Bob and how awesome he was a car owner and very competitive. And I want to talk a little bit kind of your transition from the Weikart car into running for Gambler then after you were done racing for Bob. He was kind of the cheerleader behind you making the transition to a new owner.
Yes. That was a very tough decision for me to have to leave the Weikart car. And I sat down with Mr. Weikart and asked him, what do you suggest I do and what would you like for me to do? And I don't want to leave. I want to stay with you and keep driving and keep winning races. I mean, we got a good thing going. And but the pressure kept coming from Gambler Chassis Company, which was C.K. Spurlock, the owner, and Kenny Jenkins again. That was a really good friend of mine and Mr. Weikarts. But they wanted to go to World Outlaw Racing, and they put a nice, really good team together, and they called it the house car. We did it for 2 years with Gambler. But as far as that decision, I didn't want to leave, but Pappy told me he didn't want to go racing. He liked to watch his car and stay at home and here in Pennsylvania. I said, okay. And he really cheered me on, and he even cheered me on during my whole career. I mean, he really did. He was even behind me. He put bets on me. Him and Wolfgang used to, when they was racing together, him and Wolfgang would bet if I was going to win a certain race or Kendra was going to win. And it was always Wolfie going against me, but Pappy would go for me. So, we go way back.
That is really neat. The Gambler house car, it was kind of the beginning of the era. They'd been around for a couple of years, but what was the pressure? What was the challenge? Just describe running that Gambler house car for those couple of years and what that was like for you.
Well, there we go again. I was racing for some great people, and it was very easy. They opened the door to me. They rolled out the red carpet. They let me and Kenny Woodruff just do what we wanted to do. They left us alone. They supplied us cars. They changed racing. That era, Gambler Chassis Company come in that area, and believe it or not, I had one of the first ones with my father, like I said earlier. And then we got, with Weikart, I was able to put four cars together brand new for the 83 season. Mm-hmm. And they just changed the manufacturer, the way that you could get parts now. They had CNC machines. Instead of, us having to make it at our own shop, now we could just call them and get parts. It was unbelievable. The technology. There was a gentleman there named Floyd Bailey. He was incredible. Welder, manufacturer, run machinery. Excuse me. Just the whole team. And the other big thing about that team was we was able to start running Ron Shaver motors. He was from California. And C.K. Spurlock was already running some of his motors for the last 2 or 3 years. That helped our program more than anything. We could run a motor, and you didn't have to worry about it. He would take care of them. Kenny would have take care of them, the mechanic at that time. The motor program is what made that so easy, or easier for us to keep racing. We used to race 120 times a year. I mean, go all over the country, never stop. We did this for 15 years. And So the motor issue was a big help.
We take things for granted today, especially back then. Traveling with the World of Outlaws back in the day, no cell phones, no GPSs, traveling the country, 120 races a year. You don't really get to come to home base. What was it like? And they don't have the rigs and the transporters that they have today. What was it like back then traveling with the World of Outlaws, making sure you had the parts necessary to hit those 120 races till you're able to get back to your home shop whenever that may be? What was that really like back then?
Well, back then is when, man, I can remember we're just riding around in a dually truck, and some people had just flatbed trailers. Right then at that era, the enclosed trailers started coming into the picture. But y'all, I can really believe it. I mean, I can remember Carl Kinzer and Elrod riding down the road. We would all ride, run together down the highway or something, and everybody's just. Some people didn't even have air conditioner in their vehicle at that time. It's 115 degrees. They're riding down with the windows going down the road. Everybody's just trying to make it to the next place. I used to just ride around in a van at the time. And then we did get an enclosed trailer, and we thought we, really had something, which we did. It was nice. It was, oh my goodness. And it was very nice. But it's come a long way. It's come a long way.
The camaraderie, was it, you talk about Carl and Elrod, you talk about them traveling. Was there a lot of camaraderie amongst you World of Outlaw drivers, or did everyone stay together, or everyone stay separate? What was that like as you traveled around the country? And, were you social with these guys away from it, or was it mind your own business, tend to your own business, your own team?
Pretty much myself. I stayed to myself. Mm-hmm. But I got along with everybody really well. I never had no issues with no one, believe it or not. We all raced hard. We all raced close together, but we was out for blood. And that's how we made our living. So you take Steve, Sammy, myself, Wolfgang, all of them, Brad Doty. I mean, that's how we made our living. So we would race clean. There would be some circumstances that people would get in wrecks and stuff, But that's going to happen. That's racing. But we'd race really hard because, everybody needed that dollar to get to the next place. And then that's how we put food on the table and everything. And believe it or not, off the racetrack, all those guys got together really good. But myself, I didn't really hang out with nobody. I still stayed to myself, even off the racetrack, because I was just so focused, I guess. I don't know. I look back now, and doing this right now, I enjoy this more now than I did back then because I never had time to enjoy it. I can take all my wins, and I didn't even enjoy it. I sit back and think now, like me and you was coming from the airport the other day, and I enjoy it now by looking back at everything I've done, but back then, it was so much. You had to get out of the car. You had to. All right, you get your picture taken with a checkered flag. Okay, people think, "Wow, that's the greatest thing in the world." Well, it is, but all I'm thinking about is I got to drive 12 hours tonight. I'm gonna drive all the way to Oklahoma City. We got a race tomorrow. We got to get this car ready. So it was just a 24-hour ongoing, and it was a rough schedule. And we would race even races without the Outlaws. We'd go race other places. I guess we just ate up with it.
And I've got to ask though, reminiscing and looking back on that, would you have changed that now though? Because I feel like that focus and that drive is what made you successful. But would you have looking back now, would you rather have changed that and enjoyed the moment?
No, ma'am. I wouldn't change a thing. I learned so much, and racing, you have a lot of things that go on with racing. You have hydraulics, you have fluid, you have fuel, you have motors, you have oil, you have to know a lot about everything. So I learned a lot about that growing up at a young age, and fortunate enough to just put it all together, make it work. But no, ma'am, I would not change a thing. And I'm never going to look back.
One of the eras of your life that was, it's interesting, we could compare because you had a number of successful runs with successful team owners, but from 1988 to 1992, Casey Luna, that race car, you won the World of Outlaw Championship, won the King's Royal along there, and a lot of races. Another famous car, another historic car, another epic car. How did that all come about and racing with in that car?
Yes, sir. That was a great car also. At the time, I was racing for Paul Morgan in 1980, 86 and 87, and we had 2 great years. Ken Jenkins started a company in Iowa called Challenger Sprint Cars. He started building different cars like Gambler when he started there, but they're a little different. And he offered us cars. So he put this whole deal together for me and got me and Mr. Morgan together. Paul Morgan, he was from Tampa, Florida. He had a company called Consolidated Credit, and he put me and him together. We was able to get Shaver Motors. We, just same thing as like I was really doing with the Gambler house car. And I ran a Gambler house car 84 and 85, and then I ran with Paul Morgan 86 and 87. So here I go again. I have first class stuff, first class operation, right out of the box. We're winning. We're doing great. I think I ran second in the points again. And I believe, y'all, believe it or not, that year in 1986, I believe I ran 42 seconds. 42 seconds. Now, that's second behind Steve, second behind Wolfgang, Sammy, whoever it might have been. Now, we won our share. We won like 20 races. We won our share. But we ran 42 seconds. And nobody's going to remember that except me.
Exactly right.
No one's going to remember that. And I still lost the points.
Really?
I almost won the points in 1986. But I didn't. I had to miss a race. I got burned at the Indianapolis Mile. The oil filter, a rock come through the oil filter and caught the car on fire going down the back straightaway, and I got burned really bad on my legs and my hands and everything. So the burn doctor at home in Memphis, he was taking care of my hands and everything, got them all back together, but I had to miss one race, and that put me behind. And Steve ended up winning that year also, and I ended up second. But that was an amazing year too. Yeah. And in 1987, same thing. But believe it or not, I went back to Gambler cars in 1987 with Paul Morgan. And this is how, 87, that was right. And then 88, I was racing with Paul Morgan again. And about April or May, maybe March, April of 88, he wasn't able to really do it no more. He wanted to slack off and kind of get out of it. So I said, no problem, no hard feelings. Just, I understand, it's tough. It's rough sometimes. So the tent car was out there racing. Kenny Woodruff was doing being a mechanic on it and everything. So I called Kenny and wanted to know what their plans was for the rest of the 88 season. And they're beyond, And then he said they really didn't have no plans. They was just Kenny. I think Jack Hodchow drove it for a little while. Danny Lasowski drove it for a little while. They was just kind of jumping drivers around. And I said, well, what do you think about me and you getting back together, and we'll just try to forward out and see if we can make it happen.
The challenge of the Ford, what was that a major concern for you, or did you like the challenge of a Ford in what was a Chevrolet world?
Yes, it was a Chevrolet world, but I loved the challenge. I thought that was greatest, because I wanted to put that thing on the map. That Ford car, the Ford motor, Casey Luna, I wanted to put all that on the map for them. And when I look back, when I started driving that car, this car right here, with this big block in it, this is the same type of, I would run the same setup, even back then. Because the Ford motor that we have is a lot heavier than a Chevrolet's. Even though it was aluminum, block and everything, It weighed like a steel block Chevrolet. So it was heavy like this car. And the center of the gravity, I ran this motor right here. I ran this car lower than most people did with the motor height. So I basically just started that car same way. And it just took right off. Me and Kenny had success right away. I think the second night we won Hopstop, Indiana. We ran second to Steve at Bloomington the first night right away. So we hit it off great.
Well, we talk about the motors, but I also want to go to the chassis side of things, running with Gambler and switching back and forth. Was there one that you favorited, just because you had more success with it or you were more comfortable with it? I mean, back then I'm sure things were still rather close, but there was still probably a bunch of difference as well.
Oh, yes, ma'am. No question. The Gambler Chassis Company, they made first-class operation. There was a gentleman there that welded those cars up. I got to know him really, really well. I trusted them so much, and all the technology that they brought to sprint car racing, and Floyd Bailey with his knowledge, it was like night and day having a Gambler car back then. And even today, if they would be the same way today. Yes, I ran good with the Challenger cars, but I'm definitely a Gambler man.
Tell us about 1989. From a championship, you won the World of Outlaw Championship, won the Kings Royal race along the way. You're with Casey Luna. What's your recollections of that season? What's your recollections of that season?
Yes, sir. That was a good year. We won our share of races with Outlaws. We won the World Outlaw Championship. We did win the Kings Royal. 1988, I almost won the Knoxville Nationals in the 10 car. In 1987, I ran second at the Nationals, Knoxville. 1988, with the Luna car, we ran second. And 1989 was a amazing year. Wolfgang had an amazing year that year also with the 8D car. So me and him was back and forth. He'd win, I'd run second. I'd win, he'd run second. And we finally got the championship that year. Casey Luna won it for him, won it for the Ford. He was very proud, and I was more proud for them than myself, I've been really close so many times, but I finally got to do it and finally got to win it. And it was just a great year.
You won the Kings Royal. Kings Royal, part of the lore of it is $50,000 in cash. Donnie Kreitz has a great story about a professional wrestling buddy friend of his in a suitcase carrying the money out of there. What was your $50,000 in cash story?
Yes, sir. I want to just say how rough a night that was for us. Believe it or not, we qualified really good, and you get penalized for qualifying really good. So they start to fast the cars back in the heat race. So I did not make it through the transfer spot in my heat race, so I had to run the qualifying race, in which I got to start on the front row of the B feature, and I led every lap. So that was 15 laps. So here we go. I got my time back. So I got started on the front row of the A feature for the Kings Royal. I led every lap to that. So that's 40 laps. So then I just ran 15 laps. So that's 55 laps. At Eldor, I just ran back to back. Got about a 10-minute break in between, right? And my little arms, I was tired. So my wife said, well, I was signing autographs, taking pictures, and I said, well, you just go up there and, take care. Go up there and see them, get the money and all that. Well, she comes back, believe it or not, with $50,000 in a Twinkie box. So that's how we got paid, in a Twinkie box. It was great.
Was there any Twinkies in there?
No, there was no room for Twinkies. Didn't even get a wrapper. So we'll take it however we can get it.
I love it.
I love it. Earl, he's great.
Bobby, is there any other memorable, moment of your career that really sticks out to you in all that you've accomplished?
Well, I guess my favorite year of racing would have to be right here with the Weikart car. I love that Weikart family. I love the people that was helping me. people don't understand this, but there's two gentlemen here that was local people that's who helped me on the race car. Kenny Hammond and a gentleman named Ron Zook. And Mr. Weikart, I'm going to throw him in there right now too, but those people right there, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
That's cool stuff.
Really, really cool.
You rolled along, ran your own sprint car for a little bit after the Casey Luna era, and you even tried NASCAR. Tell us about your NASCAR experience.
Well, it didn't get very far. Yes, sir, I did. At the time, I put my own little sprint car team together, the number 4 car. I said, okay, I'm going to just hit all the big races, go race when I want to. That gave me the opportunity to hang out with the Childress and the Hendricks. And, I know Jeff Gordon. I know Jeff Gordon's stepdad. So I was able to hang out with all those people, just trying to get something together to make an opportunity to race. And it got real close. One time me and John Andretti. Excuse me. John Andretti, we thought we was going to do, he had a Busch car at the time. They called it the Busch Series. And I got really close to being able to maybe get with him, but his sponsorship just really didn't work out for him either. So, I just told myself back then, look, if I can't do it right, I don't want to do it at all because I done been spoiled. These people that was behind me gave me 100%. They always gave me great equipment. Yes, I won the races. I worked hard. I did all that, but I couldn't have done it without good equipment. You need good stuff. And so I just really told myself, I said, okay, I'm not going to do it if I can't race for Richard Childress, Hendricks, a good team. I don't want to just go out here and ride around. So I didn't get to even ride around. So I just washed my hands from it and started doing something else.
Ideally, your 20-year-old self, what was your ultimate goal with racing? Was it to go IndyCar? Was it to go NASCAR and be successful? I mean, what did you want to see yourself doing?
Oh, yes. Most definitely. Just be a famous race car driver. At the time, we all thought we was going to be IndyCar drivers. Yeah, man, I want to go to Indianapolis 500. I want to go race Indy cars. And then the Winston Cup, the NASCAR thing was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So that was even looking better for us. So it didn't really matter to me which way. I even tried Mr. Luna with the tent car. He even put me together a Trans Am race. We raced out in Sonoma, California. One of his buddies from Albuquerque, New Mexico, he had a Trans Am car, and it was a Roush car. They painted it up like our 10 car and everything. We went to Sonoma. The Roush people helped. It was a Mustang, had the Ford motor in it. And we raced that race at the road course and had Case Luna on it, had the 10, it was beautiful. And the Roush people just helped us a lot with all that. And that was all I really got to do. I never got to race no Busch cars or NASCAR or nothing.
What was it like for a dirt track racer to go road racing?
Oh, it was great. It's no different. You got to just turn left, turn right, go uphill, downhill, shift, and it's just it's a race car. I remember racing go-karts back then. I raced asphalt, little road courses, dirt tracks. It didn't matter. I loved to race. And I wish I could go right now and do that.
Well, we might know some people that might maybe able to make that happen. I love it. We talk about that, the transitioning through your career. And unfortunately, all good things come to an end at some point. How was that for you, just being a driven race car driver and your focus and your love and passion for the sport? Was it a cut all ties, I'm done, this is over, never again? Or were you like, maybe we can dabble with this later on?
Yes, ma'am. That was really a tough decision. I got fortunate enough to, when I decided to quit racing, that I was able to race my little 4 car, my own little car, a couple, all the big shows and a few races. And then I raced some 360 cars. The ASCS was getting really big at this time, and they started racing the 360 cars, smaller motors. Well, in our area, like Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, they was you could go race twice a weekend, and then you'd be home all week. Well, that was pretty cool, I thought. And at the same time, my father, he had a electrical company in town in Memphis, and he's been after me for several years to start coming helping him with the company and everything. And which he's a big reason where I'm at today too. He started me off in racing, gave me everything I needed to get started, and then he even offered me a job come help me with the electrical companies. So me and my wife, we just sat down and said, okay, what do you want to do? You want to quit, and I'll go to work for him and help him out. And so basically that's what I did. And when I called it quits, I quit. I sold everything I had left. I didn't even keep my toolbox. Only thing I have as far as racing is my trophies and all my helmets and stuff like that. But now I did give one of my cars to the Hall of Fame, one of my 4 cars to the Knoxville Hall of Fame, and that was great. I love doing that. That was exciting.
You mentioned, something just struck me, and I didn't even think about this until just a moment ago. Memphis. Talk about a hotbed of sprint car racing. Why was that? Why is that? It's still stout.
Oh, yes, sir. They're still racing there right now at West Memphis, Arkansas. And believe it or not, really, really, just like here in Pennsylvania, you have 12 to 15, 20 people that's come out of the Memphis area that was dominant. You take Sammy, Ricky Hood, Jeff Swindell, Lee Brewer back in the day. There's a gentleman there that people don't even recognize. His name is Eddie Gallagher. He has won probably 20 championships there, and he gets no credit. His name's just never been out there. But this guy is talented. He's still winning championships. He's older than I am. He won a championship again this past year. Terry Gray. Y'all probably remember Terry Gray. You can go down the list. So it's just like the central Pennsylvania guys. There's a lot of them there, And then California. Let's just take California, for example. You got the Cadings. You got the Tim Greens. You got the Jimmy Seals. Man, I had to race all them people, and they was tough. But believe, everybody just really took me underneath their wing, and great people. I won't never forget them all. All the owners down the road, all the drivers, they was great.
Bobby, thanks for your time. We appreciate you spending time with us.
All right, thank you for being here, and I really appreciate the Weikarts having me here. And maybe I'll get to drive this thing around. Maybe the start of the feature tonight or something.
There you go.
Good.